You're listening to the Sisterhood of Limitless Living podcast. I'm your host, Dr. April Moreno. I'm a public health specialist focused on integrative wellness and autoimmune living, supporting the community of women, where I help you to live your best quality of life through being your best self-advocate. Let's get started. Thank you for joining us for this episode of the Sisterhood of Limitless Living podcast. I'm Dr. April Moreno today, and we are talking about what it's like to live with invisible illness. So when we talk about the autoimmune journey, sometimes invisible illness is autoimmune, but it's other things as well. Invisible illness is mental health challenges, it's cancers, it's other types of things that are fatigue, things that do affect our daily living, right? So today we're going to be talking to Ivy Cirillo, who's going to be sharing her experience of living with 22 diagnosed invisible illnesses and what that's been like for her. And I know she's recently written a book as well, a poetry memoir, so I look forward to hearing a little bit about that as well. And so welcome, Ivy. Thanks for joining us today.
Of course. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much. Tell us a little bit more about you. I know you're in New York. Tell us a little bit more.
Yeah, so I am an author, a mentor, and a speaker. I am personally dedicated to encouraging, educating, and building a community of perfectly ambitious women. I am definitely a chronic illness warrior, and I say that proudly, especially during Disability Pride Month.
Awesome. Thank you. And thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate the work that you're doing. I just love getting some time to spend with people who are really helping to encourage others to live in motivation and drive for living. So thank you so much for being here.
Of course, yeah. I mean, I can't say that I didn't have my battle in the very beginning, being so young with so many autoimmune diseases, as well as those that usually aren't diagnosed until you're older. I can say that I've always been the youngest one in my in the waiting room at my rheumatologist and all of my other specialists. So it was definitely a difficult time in the beginning, but I have kind of grown from that, and I definitely want to be a positive light for anyone else going through it.
Please tell us a little bit more about your autoimmune journey, what you have experienced over the past several years, even in childhood, as you mentioned, as a child, that you were diagnosed early on with things as well. Tell us what the story has been like for you.
Yeah, so early on, I was diagnosed with PTSD, anxiety, and depression as a child and as a teen. And since there's such a stigma against mental health, I really had no idea what any of it meant. I didn't understand it. I didn't know who I could talk to about it. It's something that I've actually written about in my book because when I finally got to college, I actually went to see a therapist, and you don't know what you can say and what you can't say, and you're afraid if you say anything about the way that you feel on a particular day that you could get in trouble or somebody else might get called in. And so it was definitely something new and a little scary to deal with. And then when I was older, my senior year of high school, I actually was a varsity weightlifter. I was super active. I lived in Florida, and so we were always outside, and all of a sudden I started gaining weight, and it seemed a little odd because you have to be in a weight class for weightlifting, and I was going up in a weight class, but all I was eating was eggs and salads, and I was running and lifting continuously. And because of that, I almost actually quit weightlifting my senior year of high school. But I'm like one of those people that can't not finish things, and I'm a slight perfectionist. So I decided, it's one more season. How bad could it really be? I'm just going to go ahead and get my physical, continue doing what I'm doing, and then I don't have to move forward with it after my senior year. And when I went in for my physical, which I almost didn't even do because I was going to quit, they found a lump on my thyroid. And so they immediately said that we needed to get an ultrasound. During the ultrasound, they found a goiter, and they weren't sure if it was going to be cancerous or not. So they immediately sent me for blood work, which was my first set of blood work ever. But luckily, my mom was a phlebotomist, and it was her doctor's office, so she actually got to take my blood work for 3 years of my diagnosing process. And they found out that I had hypothyroidism, but they didn't tell me for about 2 weeks. And so I was kind of like freaking out thinking I had throat cancer, which was not exactly something you want to experience like ever, let alone your senior year of high school. And when I came in, they sat me down or I don't even think I sat down. I think I let my mom sit, and the doctor straight up asked me like, how are you standing? And I was like, I don't understand the question. Like, I have 2 legs, I have 2 feet, I'm standing because that is what you do. And he said, like, if you hadn't come in, if you didn't get the physical when you did, you wouldn't have made it. My numbers were astronomical. I think they were about 20 times what the normal range is supposed to be.
Wow.
And from there, we kind of went into the mode of just trying to figure out the dosage for the medication for hypothyroidism. But after about a year and a half, even though all my numbers were in range, I still didn't feel right. And it just went from there, trying to figure out exactly what the issue was.
Okay. And so tell us what it's been like having had 22 different types of illnesses, diagnoses. How is it that you've been able to continue with a perspective of wanting to help people, encourage other people? What has that journey been like? And then tell us a little bit about your poetry memoir process.
Yeah, so I will say that it was really, really hard. When I first started getting diagnosed, I had a lot of doctors that really didn't believe me. When I was living in Alabama, I had an endocrinologist tell me that no doctor will take me seriously because I'm too young to have more than one illness. And I fought him on it. I told him something is wrong. Just because my numbers are in range, but I'm feeling all of these symptoms doesn't mean that I'm okay. And I forced him to do blood work for me, and he called me back immediately and told me that if I was like his sister, his daughter, his wife, he would have me see a rheumatologist immediately. And when I spoke to him, he had told me that he regretted opening up Pandora's box, which I will never understand, because if he didn't open Pandora's box like I made him do, I might not have ever been diagnosed.
Why
would
he say
crazy.
That he would regret it? Why would he want
Yeah, that's what I never really understood, honestly. And I mean, I've been through kind of the disbelief with multiple doctors throughout my entire journey. I mean, I went to an ER one day. I drove myself because I thought I was having a heart attack. I had experienced such horrible pains the day before that I told my partner at the time, I told him, like, I think I need to go to the hospital because I'm afraid if I go to sleep right now and I go to bed that I won't wake up tomorrow. And that is like, it's crazy that I was almost not gonna go just because I didn't have health insurance, but it is also horrible that someone has to go through that. And when I went, we did some testing and they sent me home after like a whole day of testing. And they just told me, it's just anxiety. You just need to stress less. And little did I know that 4 years later, I would be diagnosed with a heart condition that wasn't diagnosed then.
Yeah, it's really good to know that you are advocating for yourself. It's really powerful to be able to save your own life, really, when the doctors aren't there to do it. They're not ready.
Yeah, that's why I wanted to be such like a light in this whole journey for other people, because I know that I wasn't being heard, and I know that my rheumatologist, when I would leave the room and I would tell them that I have more symptoms, or they would leave the room and I could hear them on the other side of the door talking to the nurses. She was telling them like how I'm crazy and I'm a hypochondriac because I always think that I have something new and nothing is ever good enough and all of these things. And like, I don't know that she knew that I could hear what she was saying, but it's hard not to be heard, because I also have lung nodules and I used to go every 6 months for CT scans. And a nurse asked me one time, like, oh, honey, what are you doing here? And I was like, I'm getting a CT scan. Obviously, that's why I'm in the CT room. And she was like, but what for? And I was like, well, basically to see if I have cancer and like if my nodules have grown. And she goes, oh, honey, you're too young and too pretty to have cancer. As if like that's even the determining factor. So I know like because children have cancer all of the time. And frankly, I don't think you have to be ugly to be sick. I think that like it's crazy that people aren't being heard and they're the only ones that can advocate for themselves. Even my family, because they didn't know what was going on with me when I was younger, they thought like I just didn't want to spend time with them. But it was because being in Florida and being active and being outside is normal. I'd be outside for 10 minutes and I'd be like, I don't feel good. I need to go sit in the AC. Something's wrong. And we had no idea that I had lupus and I just couldn't be in the sun anymore.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And how are you doing these days? How are you managing your health?
So probably not being the best patient, and I don't recommend it for other people. But after a couple of surgeries in 2017, I came off all of my medications simply because I couldn't swallow them at the time. But for the last few years, I've actually been in remission up until about June. Everything kind of went downhill, and I think it was because I was ignoring my body. And I always say that my illnesses are a blessing and a curse because it has caused me to start listening to my body more, even though I'm still not the best at doing it. It kind of went downhill, I realized, when I had to start wearing the masks at work and my heart rate was going through the roof and like I was really having trouble breathing and walking and everything like that. So I've actually been on medical leave for the last month, but I have high hopes. I am trying some new supplements, so I'm hoping that that is helping. I'm all for kind of a holistic approach. I definitely believe in Western medicine and everything like that, but I've had a lot of negative symptoms from medication, so I just am not the most open to adding new things to my body right now, but I'm trying to be healthy and eating healthy and trying to get out on my bike and trying to go for walks when I can.
Mm-hmm. That's great. That's so good to hear that you're staying active, doing what you can out there and combining the Western medicine with what works for you and what doesn't work, and then deciding what doesn't work and then going into other options such as nutrition and alternative medicine as well as a consideration. And so tell us a little bit more about your book.
Yeah, so when I was first going through my diagnoses process and I got really, really sick, I was actually homebound for a couple of years, and it helped me get back into my love of writing, which I had kind of distanced myself from, because for a decent amount of my life, I was kind of told that you can't make money as a writer, you need to go do something else. So I actually went to school with the intention of being a lawyer, which was probably the worst thing that I could have decided to do because I wouldn't actually want to do it. And I had a philosophy teacher that there was a final project where we had to write an op-ed for a newspaper and submit it. And he had a meeting with me and told me, I don't care if you're just writing the insides of Hallmark cards, you need to be writing. And I kind of ignored that until I was at home with absolutely nothing to do. And so when I was homebound, I started writing, and I had heard of this month-long writing project. And I actually wrote my poetry memoir in just 30 days, over 200 pages in 30 days. And it was a huge release for me. I was able to kind of work through a lot of the things that I had dealt with in my childhood. And I had written a letter to my biological father, who actually tried to end my life, and wrote how I forgave him in it. And so I was able to get a lot of like the trauma that I had dealt with out into that piece of work. And from there, I kind of just let it sit for a few years, but I was blogging at the time, and I was also going through the diagnoses process at the time. So through the blog, I had written a letter to my younger self about kind of what I wish I had known and kind of where I would be. in a year, because I obviously know if I write a letter to my younger self, the good things that can come, even though there will be difficult things. And that took a lot of traction with the public community of those with invisible illnesses and disabilities. And so I've continued writing ever since, and I am currently working on my second book.
Mm-hmm. Tell us a little bit about the second book. Is it going to be a poetry memoir as well, or is it a different style, similar style?
So my second book is going to be another poetry book. I'm a multi-genre author, but I felt really, really called to do this one. I'm thinking it's going to be about the same length, probably about 200 pages. I got the idea when I was actually on a flight back from Sweden last October. When I decided to move to New York, I decided to quit my full-time job, and I was going to travel for the first time in my life against all of the issues that I've dealt with my health. I took a solo trip to Paris, London, and Stockholm. And on the way back, this woman sat next to me, and we had a really open and honest conversation, which I apparently tend to do on all of my flights with strangers.
That's awesome.
And she had opened up about her granddaughter, and I think her name was Iris. I could be wrong, but for some reason that's what's sticking in my head. And she said that her granddaughter is going through like the normal, typical issues in high school, and she just wants to like grab her by the shoulders and shake her and tell her, like, you don't have to be the skinniest, you'll never be the prettiest or the smartest or anything, you will never be the superlative, but that is okay. You are you, and you are worthy, and you are everything, and that is enough. Like, you are enough. And all I could think is there are so many things that I wish I had heard growing up, and I'm sure like other women wish that they had heard or wish that they could tell others. And so my second book is just going to be a book dedicated to all of like the struggles you might endure as a woman, but all of the amazing things that you also are and deserve and are worthy of, because we are. And I mean, that's also part of why I started Perfectly Ambitious, because I think every woman is constantly told they're too ambitious if they want to have a career and a family, or if they want to follow multiple passions. Like, it is okay to be too much. It is okay to be, according to them, too ambitious. Mm-hmm. It's okay to be you.
Mm-hmm. What is Perfectly Ambitious? Is this your blog, or is this another project?
Yeah, so Perfectly Ambitious is the blog that I started back in 2016 when I was first going through my diagnoses journey. And that is where I kind of found my online community in regards to those going through their diagnoses and their autoimmune diseases as well. And it's kind of where I found like my first tribe. And so it is a blog that I'm currently rebranding right now. And then eventually it will also be a podcast. So I'm kind of in the works of trying to make all of my new content and then go through the rebranding, because it is 4 years old now. There was a lot of good things in there. There was a ton about chronic illnesses and a ton of information for those going through it, but also the loved ones that are going through part of it as well, and traveling and just entrepreneurship and everything. And I'm just going to be doing a rebrand to kind of tie it all in more so for other people going through this journey, whether or not they have chronic illnesses.
Mm-hmm. Wow, I'm excited to see it. It sounds great.
Thank you.
Yeah, I can definitely, and I think many women can resonate with a lot of the things that you're saying in terms of not feeling like enough, wanting to connect to ourselves and understand that everything we do is fine, that it's okay for us to be who we want to be ourselves, and to follow our passions and our journey. So I'm really excited to see your blog. And tell us a little bit about advice and tips you would give to somebody who's going through, for me, like particularly, I tend to have this particular heart for the people who are not diagnosed yet. They're struggling and they're having these awful symptoms in their bodies and minds, but they're not getting the answers that they need. what advice and tips would you give to somebody like that who has not yet been diagnosed or is just really overwhelmed by their health condition?
Yeah, so I will always stand by the same advice every single time because I went through it for years on end without actually knowing what the problem is. Um, just be an advocate for yourself. When I was going through it, I was actually not really speaking to my family, and I didn't have anyone else really to support me. I just had to kind of take note of all of my symptoms, document my changes, and bring them to the team that I was working with. And if they didn't believe me, I just found somebody else, and I just kept going until I had done every test under the sun and until I had answers. And some of those things I had to figure out on my own. I did research. My dysautonomia, my heart condition, it actually, I had no idea until recently that it causes adult onset allergies. And so when I was having these horrible allergic reactions, I had no idea what was wrong because it came out of nowhere. I was itching for like 30 minutes to an hour after every shower, and I couldn't figure out if I was allergic to the water or the soap or the detergent on my towels. I could not figure it out. I showered at other places. I used other soaps. I used different detergents. I switched everything up, and I still couldn't get answers. And it got to the point that my doctor tested me for MS, which luckily I don't have, but that testing process isn't the best thing in the world either. And it was only until I started noticing reactions to food that I was able to figure out that I'm allergic to coconut and palm and all of their derivatives, which are essentially in every prepackaged food and every soap and hair and body product. It wasn't until I started looking at the derivatives that I noticed the reason I couldn't figure it out when I was changing everything out was because everything I switched it to also had those ingredients.
Mm-hmm.
And so sometimes you just have to do a little bit of research on your own and just keep standing up for yourself, because unfortunately there might not be somebody else to do it. And not saying go to like WebMD though, because you will definitely spare yourself.
Mm-hmm.
But kind of just keep track of your body. There's a lot of health apps and things like that that you can find resources, and you can track your mood and your diet and your symptoms, and you can even reach out to doctors and things like that. And so there's definitely a lot out there that I hadn't realized when I went through it.
Thank you. Those are important points, keeping a journal, taking note of all the symptoms so that you can put the pieces together, even when the medical community is not able to do that, is very powerful. I agree. How can people get in contact with you? How can we find out more about you on social media and the work you're doing?
Yeah, so my website is just ivycirillo.com. And then all of my social media is Cirillo Ivy, so just my name backwards. And then you can find my book on there or on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, things like that. It's called Unveiled, a Poetry Memoir. And then I also offer coaching services and things like that as well on my website, and that's ivycirillo.com/mentor.
Mm-hmm. And Cirillo spelled Cirillo, right?
Correct.
All right. Well, thank you so much for being here with us today. Do you have any last comments you'd like to share with the community?
My only comment, I guess, is I am offering a special right now in case anyone is interested. Through everything that I've been through and being perfectly ambitious and multi-passionate, I understand that sometimes people need a little bit of clarity and a little bit of help along the way, whether or not it's in regards to personal goals, health goals, or business goals. So I am offering a day of Voxer with me on sale for $50 off, and that's $199. And that also includes a brainstorming session with me, which is normally $149. So I am offering a $200 special right now.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much.
Of course.
Yeah, thanks for joining us today. I look forward to seeing the work that you're going to be sharing with the world in the coming months and years. And yeah, thank you for being a light to the community.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Thank Thank you for listening to this episode of the Sisterhood of Limitless Living podcast, Season 2. Hope you enjoyed the episode. Look forward to having you join us in upcoming episodes as well, where we continue to talk about integrative wellness and autoimmune living our best lives, being our own best advocates. Feel free to subscribe on iTunes to the podcast, and we are also available on several other locations as well. For more information about Dr. April Moreno, you can visit aprilmorenophd.com. Take care.